Hey, it's the Sales Hunter podcast. I'm Mark Hunter. Who is that? That's Anthony Iannarino. How you doing, Anthony?
All good.
Good, good. You know what? We got a great show planned, so let's just roll the video and we'll get back and we'll kind of do an official introduction of
Sounds
the
good.
man, the myth, the legend.
You're listening to the Sales Hunter podcast with Mark Hunter, where the focus is to help you as a sales leader sell with confidence and integrity. And now here's your host.
Hey, welcome back. And of course, it's Anthony Iannarino. Now, let's see. If we go back in time, AI, artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
Well, wait a minute. That means you were AI before there was AI.
I was AI long before there was.
So you are the original AI.
Yes.
That's cool.
And anytime anybody says AI, I feel like I should get a quarter or something.
Well, I think you should. I mean, I think you own the intellectual. Notice I said intellectual rights.
It's just like a trademark.
Yeah, it is. But anyway, hey, enough about AI. Let's talk about elite sales strategies. You've been quiet for the last couple of years. I knew you were working on a book, and of course, this is a good one. This is a good one. Talk to us about elite sales strategies.
You know what's funny about this is that on the 18th, I turn in my manuscript for the 5th book, and on the 19th, the 4th book comes out, and on the 20th, I sign a contract for book 6.
Isn't that sweet? That is sweet. You have got momentum.
Yeah, and I apparently I have a lot to say right now.
Well, hey, come on. How many days consecutively have you written your blog? If you were not subscribing to the sales blog, you got to get it. How many consecutive days?
I missed 10 days in 2010 when I went to Tibet and I didn't take a laptop with me because I didn't think I would be able to write, but I would have. If I would have brought it, I could have. So minus those 10 days, I started writing on December 28th, 2009.
2009. So since 2010, you can say you have been consecutively every day for more than 10 years. Yeah. So that means you have got more than a little bit of content to write. And of course, like you always say, writing is a muscle that you have to exercise.
Yeah.
And it really comes out in the book, Elite Sales Strategies. Yeah.
You were at Outbound when I gave the speech about being one up.
Yep.
And I had told Victor and you, I think, in the VIP room for Outbound, like, I have no idea how this is going to go. People are either going to understand what I'm saying and they're going to get it, or they're going to run screaming out of the room. Like, either one of those was possible. I wasn't sure which one it was going to be. And then when I started to deliver it and I watched people's faces as they were catching on, I was like, wait, they got this. And no one went running out of the room, at least that not that I saw anyway. And the concept's incredibly important right now because you have to lead your clients. And if you're not leading the client and you're being led by the client, then you're not really a consultative salesperson. I mean, so most of this is about how you give advice and good counsel and recommendations so the client can make the best decision. And you have to remember, like, you're doing this every single day. You're going out selling whatever it is you sell. And you're helping all kinds of people make really good decisions about their business. But they make that decision once every 7 years, 10 years. How could they be good at making that decision when they never do it? And so my opinion is that it's our obligation to be one up, which means I know more than you know, and I'd like to share something with you. And then in the same way, your clients are one up about their industry and their company and what they can do and what they need. So you're one down and they're one down. And the way that both of us get out of the one down position is by transferring our experience to the other person. So when I explain to you all the experience I have selling what I sell, I can help you make a better decision. And when you teach me how to think about how I serve you best, now I'm getting out of my one down position too.
So how do we do that in a manner that when we're one up on them in terms of knowing more about the product, that we don't come across stepping on them?
Yeah. I mean, the best way to do it, Mark, is to say something like, listen, you have no idea what you're doing, and I'm way, way better at this than you. So you just sit down and no, that's probably not the right way to do it.
That's kind of a little unique option. Yes.
It's a little direct. But
Yeah.
no, what you do is you say something like, one of the things I'd like to share with you is a couple of the factors that seem to be really important at the beginning of this conversation. And I'd like to share that and then get your feedback on how that resonates with you, if it does, and how we might think about this together. Like you don't have to ever put somebody in the one down position when they're already in the one down position. Like they don't know how to make the decision. So they hope that you do, and they hope that you know some things that they don't know. And I've said this for a very long time. If you don't know something that your client doesn't know, they don't need you. They don't need you. They need somebody who knows more than they do, so that they have somebody who can guide them to the better results that they're looking for.
Yeah. Now, you share in your book a number of strategies as to how to do that. Share with the audience, what's one of those strategies?
There's 9 of them. Essentially, there's 9. So there's the big strategy, which is just being one up. But then you have to figure out how to do that. And so there's a number of things that you can look at. The first one that I would point to is information disparity. And information disparity is really, I know something you don't know. Can I share it with you? And that one's really important. And what happened, and you and I we've known each other for a very long time. And you remember when social came out and when the internet just took the whole country by storm. And you have all these people at that time when social started saying things like, oh, now there's just information parity. Like your client knows everything that you know. And that's kind of like going to WebMD, putting in your symptoms and deciding you're a doctor. Like you're not a doctor. A doctor is a doctor and they have experience. You have some facts that you can point to, but you don't really have the experience to know what's really wrong with you. The way to maintain information disparity is to always continue to study like what your clients need, what's working, what's not working, what don't they know that if they knew they would change. And what you'll find out is that a lot of your clients have outdated assumptions. Like those assumptions were really good when they started doing what they were doing, but now 7 years has gone by and they're not getting the results anymore. And they're like, why can't we get the results? This used to work for us. Well, lots of things on the outside world changed. And now what you do doesn't make any sense anymore. And it's time to move on to something else. The reason that you have information disparity is not because your client can't go and read all the facts about your company and your product on your website. The reason that you have a sort of disparity in information is because they don't have the experience. And that experience is something that they can never have unless they sell what we sell. So if you've not sold what we sold and you've not helped hundreds of clients, then they can have no way of knowing how to make that decision.
How do you overcome that customer who feels they have had the experience? They feel they've had the experience. They feel they've got all the knowledge.
Yeah, those are the best. So sometimes you have to put somebody in the one down position. Sometimes you have to say like, hang on. And the way that you do that is you ask a question that they can't answer.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can say, what percentage of people are actually pursuing that strategy that you just described? And then like, I don't know, probably everybody. No, it's like 12%. And the reason is that you have to have these factors in order to be able to do it that way. And so if you ask a question and they don't know the answer, now you did put them in the one down position, but you should never make them feel like they're in the one down position. You're trying to get them to be one up. And that is only 12% of people can do it this way. The other 78 or 88% of the people have to do it another way. And here's why. Now they're getting the information that they need to make a better decision. So I'm just going to say caution. Like if you want to put somebody in the one down position, you might get some of this. Like you might get somebody putting their fists up and deciding like, okay, now we're going to have a contest here. You don't want a contest. You just want to help them see something they couldn't see before.
For those of you listening to the audio version, he just put his fists up as if he was going to attack me. No, he wouldn't do that. No. Hey, now it was very interesting because you said, you lay out the facts, and that's a key thing of your consistent in your sales strategies. Lay out the facts, but never lay them out in a manner that you're demeaning. Lay them out in kind of an open table for the customer to take them.
Yeah, and so the one thing that makes you one up is recognizing that you're one down. Like that's the fastest way not to be one down anymore, is to just consent to this is what we're seeing right now. How's this showing up in your world? And then I go, it doesn't show up in our world like that. It shows up in this other way. Great. Now I have another perspective that I just have on. Now it shows up in multiple ways in different kinds of companies under different circumstances. Now I'm an even better sales rep because I understand sometimes this is right and sometimes this is better. And until you decide I'm going to be one down, it's very hard to be one up. And I know you, like me, like we have books, we're surrounded by books, we're reading all the time because we recognize like I'm ignorant of almost everything. So how do you get that information? You have to go find somebody who's one up to transfer it to you.
And I love how you said that because it is just laying it out there for the customer, and it's not jamming it down their throat. Because again, you're creating that relationship, you're creating that environment
Yeah.
for the customer to learn from you.
Yeah.
Now, let me spin this around here a little bit because you talk a lot about the complex sale, the longer sales cycle, and so forth. How does what you talk about in elite sales strategies apply to the person who's selling the shorter sales cycle?
Yeah. Anything that you can do in a long sales cycle, you can probably do equally well in a shorter sales cycle. What I would tell you is that a lot of what I do with insights and helping people see something that they haven't seen is what I'm really trying to execute is a paradigm shift. So if you think about if you and I flew to Minneapolis, which we did at one time to have a meeting, we would have gotten a cab because that's what there were. There were taxis. And then Uber comes along and says, look, you can have a black car. There'll be somebody who's very pleasant. You will also have water probably provided for you, and it'll be a very different experience. And you're just going to do it all on your phone. And that's a paradigm shift. And I don't know if you know this, but last week, Uber added all the taxis to their platform.
Mhm.
So if you decide you want a taxi, you can still do that. But now it's going to show up right on time for you because they're using the app as well. So you're trying to get them to make this paradigm shift of like the way that we used to do this was very good when we did it, and now it's not. Why not? I'm going to show you why not. And then I'm going to show you what you need to do now because the world has changed. And if you can get that paradigm shift at the beginning, you're answering the question, why change? That's really what you're trying to do is get them to understand what we did was right, but it's no longer as effective as it was. Now it's time for us to evolve.
You dropped a real strong truth bomb right at the beginning of that when you said the same strategies that work for the longer sale work for the shorter sale, and I so agree with you on that. It's so many times salespeople just say, "Oh, that won't work for me. That won't work for me." You've never tried it. They've never
Yeah.
tried. They themselves are victims of the same things we believe are customers. And again, that's this paradigm shift that I think has to take place in the sales community.
And it's the same thing. It's outdated assumptions. You know, the assumptions were good. I mean, so if you go to something like Sandler's the same age I am. I mean, that program is literally over 5 decades. Like it's that old. At the time, it was exactly right for the environment. It was exactly right for the environment. But now when somebody says, "Well, how much is this going to cost?" and you're like, "Well, I can't tell you." Now you're going to have people go like, "Was it because it's embarrassingly high, or you're trying to rip me off, or are you afraid to talk about money with me? Like you're supposed to be a trusted advisor, a consultative salesperson. You can't talk about money." Like it doesn't work. And don't drop your candy on the lobby floor, which means don't do free consulting. If you're not doing free consulting right now, I promise you, everybody you compete with is, and they're
Mhm.
going to do that anyway. And like, well, I can't tell them how we would solve this because they might do it with someone else. Yeah, someone else who isn't afraid of them, like somebody else who's not going to be afraid to consult with them because they're confident that they're going to win the deal anyway. So I think that that's the same thing, Mark. It's exactly the outdated assumptions. Like that was true at its time. Like, and so you can't criticize it. Everybody was doing it that way, and it was working.
Now, Anthony, that brings up something really, really cool because think about it. Why are salespeople not making that shift? I got a theory, but I'd love to hear your theory.
My theory is that if you did something, so let's go to two different categories here. So if you grew up in solution selling like all of us did, and it worked for you for a very, very long time, and that's how you know success. Like from, I'm going to find a problem. I'm going to explain how the solution solves it. Well, that worked for, let's call it 35 years.
Mm-hmm.
We'll go to 1988. We'll start with Neil Rackham's spin selling. Okay, so we'll start there. So if you do that, if everything that you know and it worked perfectly for you and you met your quota, you have a really tough time giving that up because it's what you know as success. And then if you are a younger person, your manager or your sales leader is going to want you to sell the way that they know worked for them, even though it may not work anymore. It's what they knew. And so they will ask you to do the same thing. So that's one of the reasons. I think that's a couple reasons really why people don't change. And because they don't understand that clients really need something very different than they did in the past.
Yeah, and I've got a theory that their world hasn't been made uncomfortable enough for them to change.
Yeah.
And it's either because, well, they're still making enough money that they feel comfortable with, or their boss, their environment is reticent, to change.
Yeah.
But either way, it's death by 1,000 nicks. Your business is going to fade away. Hey, we do have a question that has come in from a gentleman in Spain. Would you care to share some examples of the techniques discussed today from your own career?
Yeah, I'm happy to share some of my experience. I grew up in temporary staffing, and so temporary staffing has a couple things that are worth knowing. It's incredibly competitive, and it's very much a commodity. So I have a good database. You have a good database. Guess what? We both have the same names in our database. I'm going to do a background check. You're going to do a background check. I'm going to do a drug screen. You're going to do a drug screen. So that's the kind of thing that happens. So in order to be able to occupy the space that's one up, you have to really be able to teach somebody something that they hadn't known. And what happened to me is I had a client who would refuse to raise their pay rate. And I realized I'm going to get fired for failing to meet their needs. And it's not my fault because they set the pay rate. Like I can't do anything about the pay rate. And with nothing but desperation, I built 100-slide deck of all of the data from the Census Bureau, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times. Cato did a study about how much people make on welfare, and they were actually making more than the $9 that this client was paying in 2001. And I bludgeoned these people with data. And part of it, Mark, was exactly what you said. I just set the data in front of them and let them look at it for a minute so that they would have a chance to make that connection without me having to tell them what the connection was. And I did that. It took me an hour. This is a 100% true story. And it's what changed the way that I started to sell in 2001. As soon as I was done with the presentation, the full bird colonel from Vietnam, who's the HR senior leader, like not the right kind of fit when you think about a full bird colonel in HR, right? He said, "That was a really good briefing." And I said, "Thanks." And he said, "Can I have a copy of that slide deck?" That's the first time anyone ever asked me for my slide deck because it was not the slide deck that I normally carried. And I said, "Why do you need the slide deck?" And he said, "I'm going to brief our senior leaders at 3:00 today, and it'd be very handy to have that." And I said, "Okay, you can have it." And he said, "Take your logo off." And I was like, "Oh, are you kidding me? Like, I don't even get credit for doing your homework for you. I don't even get a little bit of credit." 2 hours later, after his meeting at 5:00, he called me and he raised the pay rate from $9 to $12.50, which was $2 million more that they decided to invest after I got rid of their false assumptions. And the false assumption was labor is plentiful and labor is cheap. And neither of those two things were true. And that was a $2 million increase in what they were spending with me. All of it went to the temporary employees. It took me, I'd love to say, Mark, I would love to be able to say, like, I immediately recognized the value of what I did and I started doing it in every single meeting. But that is not what happened. It was months and months before I realized if you can teach them that they're wrong without hurting their feelings and without making them feel like they're one down, you can get them to a place where they'll make the right decision. And some sooner, some take a little longer. But the structure of the conversation where you start with why change and you help people understand what's changed in their world and what they need to do is what I would call value creation. They learn something. They feel now like I'm better prepared to do something about this problem that I have.
You just said so much there, and the one thing was you didn't realize the full context of what you did with that, and that's amazing.
No.
How many times in our sales career we've done that, and it's only till months and years later that we
Yeah.
realize, wow, that was a great technique. But here's what I want to back up to. Let's back the bus up to this, because you were in a highly competitive, highly repetitive industry, temporary
Yeah.
labor. I mean, there are companies out there literally hiring temps every day.
Right.
And you come in using a strategy completely foreign to that type of selling. And look what you walked out the door with.
Yeah.
And so when we sit there and say, oh, no, I can't use these strategies at Anthony. No. Here was a very good example why what you talk about fits for regardless of what it is that you sell. Yeah.
And I'll tell you what actually changed my approach was maybe a couple months later, Mark. I was at a company in Cincinnati called Takumi Stamping, and I had a meeting with the senior HR leader. And I walked in and I reached into my laptop bag and I started to pull the laptop out. And the guy sitting across from me said, "You can put the laptop away. You're not going to need it." And I'm like, okay. I said, well, I got this presentation on here that will show you all of our processes and how everything works and why it makes sense to do these things the way that we do them. And he said, put it away. I'm just going to ask you some questions. And if you do okay there, we'll probably do business together. And I said, well, a lot of what you're going to ask me is already on a slide deck that I have in here. And he goes, I don't want to see your slides. And I said, okay. And I set it down and we had a conversation. Now, I would love to tell you that that was enough to change my mind, but it wasn't. A friend of mine called and he said, I was at a meeting and I walked into the conference room and I plugged in my laptop and the senior leader said, if you open that laptop, I'm going to throw you out of here. And I'm like, people really don't like slide decks. Like, I didn't know. They just didn't like a certain kind of slide deck, the kind that's all why us and not why change and how we change.
That's so key. And it comes back to another principle that I talk a lot about, and that is you got to know your stuff so well that you don't, if you get pushing that, you don't need your presentation. Because I always say the best presentations are the presentations never given, because you're having a conversation.
Yeah.
You're having that robust conversation.
And if you use an insight deck like I do, like you'll have it memorized in no time.
Right.
And then you don't need the deck at all. You can just talk.
That is so valuable because you have the deck totally memorized. Hey, our good friend Pete is watching. Great time. Hey, we got to wrap this show up real quick here.
We're 1 minute late.
Yeah, I know. Elite Sales Strategies goes on sale April 19th. That means, hey, if you're catching this on a podcast, you can buy it now. If you're watching it live, hey, get the order. Elite Sales Strategies. You're going to be talking about it at Outbound, right?
We'll have copies of it at Outbound for sure.
Good.
But Mark, I have Leading Growth coming out on September 21st at Outbound. So we'll have a couple new books for people.
We're going to have a couple on. Hey, so I'm going to tell the audience, stick around for the after the show because Anthony and I will talk just very briefly about Outbound and some other cool things. Because Anthony and I, we really haven't talked live face-to-face like this. Well, by way of StreamYard in months. So stick around for the video. Stick around, and we're going to be back in just a moment to talk more. You're listening to the Sales Hunter podcast with Mark Hunter. We do invite you to check out and subscribe to the Sales Hunter podcast. Each week, a new episode with people like Anthony Iannarino. Back to the show. Hey, welcome back, Anthony. Outbound, September.
Yes.
Yeah. Looking forward to it?
Yeah. And you know what? You don't know this. I have lots of secrets that I keep from Mark specifically because
Good.
I don't want him to get it. I don't want him to get too excited because he's excitable. If you don't know that, he's an excitable guy. So I have to be careful with what I release to him. I was in Dallas last weekend. I had a gig and then I was helping my son look at apartment complexes. But while I was there, I visited 2 properties in Dallas for the 2023 outbound Dallas, Texas. How you
Yes.
feel about that?
I'm feeling good because Dallas is now my home.
I know.
So see, it's about time. See, I had to move here to Dallas to get outbound to move to Dallas. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's gonna. I'll tell you what outbound really is. I mean, I'm amazed at the conversation, and of course, hey, we got the countdown to outbound podcast, which starts May 1st, and of course, we'll have you on as a guest on that one.
I think this is what I believe to be true. It's hard for people on the West Coast to go to Atlanta. It's a long flight
Yeah,
or multiple flights for some people depending on where they live. But Dallas, it's right in the center of the country.
why do you think I moved here?
Yeah, like it's a perfect spot for us to have people come from East Coast and West Coast in the middle of the country, and probably one flight for most people if they're in a reasonably large city. I mean, they're going to have a direct to Dallas. So I think that that's going to help get some access for people who, they want to come, but it takes much more of their time to get there and get back. And
Yeah.
I think that this will make it easier for a whole lot of people to come and see Outbound for the first time.
Yeah. Plus the 25 million people that live within a 3.5 hour drive, depending on traffic, of the Dallas area. But anyway,
Yeah.
but I hate Outbound 22, September. And I'll tell you what, the lineup looks great. I think it's going to be an absolute kick to be back, get the group back together.
Yeah,
This is
it's
a
going to
great
be
group.
good. And this, last year, I just had somebody tell me, like, you guys are so brave. Like, you did Outbound in 2021 in June when most everything is still pandemic world, right? And we had an audience that wanted to be there.
Yeah.
We wanted to be there. All the speakers wanted to be there, and everybody showed up. And I'll remind you that we had to have the fire marshal distance everyone 6 feet in every direction. But as soon as they shut the doors, everybody just sat with their friends.
Oh, yeah.
Like nothing was happening, like nothing was going on, and everybody was safe and everybody enjoyed it. So this year, though, there'll be less of that. So we're going to have something different.
Yo, it's going to be another and it's really hard to describe Outbound. It is that it truly is.
It's a Kiss concert mixed with Cirque du Soleil.
And that overtakes a sales meeting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very much so.
It's not a boring meeting.
No. Website. We will put it in the show notes along with your book, Elite Sales Strategies, along with your website. But outboundconference.com is where to go to find out all the information on it. So, hey, we do have to wrap up. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
thesalesblog.com or LinkedIn and just type in Anna Reno.
There you go. Because you're out there every day.
Every day.
Anthony, thank you.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. Elite Sales Strategies. The book is out now. Get it. And hey, I'm Mark Hunter, the Sales Hunter. This is the Sales Hunter Podcast. We'll see you next week with another great guest. Great selling.